The silence of the void is usually a metaphor. In the cold expanse between stars, there is always the background radiation, the hum of the ship's reactor, the quiet static of life support systems. But here, in the command spire of the Ethelgard dreadnought, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of a held breath. It was the silence of a predator moments before the spine of its prey is snapped. High Exarch Xyler stood before the chaotic swirl of the viewport, his 4 ocular sensors narrowing as they focused on the distant, unassuming star system. Sol, a yellow dwarf star, remarkably average, surrounded by a debris field of gas giants and rocky worlds. To the casual observer, it was nothing. To the Galactic Council, it was a tumor. Humanity had been discovered only 50 standard cycles ago. In that blink of cosmic time, they had not expanded peacefully. They had not sought trade agreements or cultural exchanges. They had simply consumed. They mined asteroids with a ferocity that frightened the strip-mining guilds of the Outer Rim. They terraformed with a reckless disregard for ecological stability, forcing worlds to bend to their biology rather than adapting themselves. And when the Council sent a cease and desist order, humanity had sent back a single data packet containing a video of a human commander laughing. Just laughing. It was an insult the Ethelgard could not abide. Xyler's mandibles clicked together, a sound like dry twigs snapping. Beside him, his tactical sub-commander, a younger, more nervous creature named Vrelt, tapped a holographic interface. "The weapon is primed," High Exarch Vrelt whispered, as if speaking too loudly might alert the primitives light years away. The null point detonator, a planet cracker, a device so heinous it had been banned by the treaties of Orion for 3,000 years. It did not explode in a conventional sense. It inverted the local physics of a gravity well. It would turn the third planet, Earth, into a singular point of infinite density, and then, nothing. It would simply erase the annoyance. Do it, Xyler commanded. There was no ceremony, no grand speech. This was pest control. Vrelt pressed the rune. From the belly of the dreadnought, a sleek obsidian cylinder was jettisoned. It carried no engines, for it did not travel through normal space. It slipped into the substrata of reality, the shadow dimension where distance was a suggestion rather than a law. The weapon vanished. On the sensors, it was gone. In reality, it was already halfway to Earth. Xyler turned his back on the viewport. Prepare the fleet for cleanup. Once the homeworld is gone, the human colonies will fracture. We will sweep them up within a solar week. The arrogance of the Ethelgard was their oldest armor. It had protected them for eons. They believed that because they were ancient, they were untouchable. They believed that because they understood the math of the universe, they owned it. They were about to learn that understanding the math is not the same as having the will to rewrite it. On Earth, the sky did not darken. The birds did not stop singing. The oceans did not boil. The approach of a null-point detonator is undetectable by electromagnetic sensors. It has no heat signature. It emits no radiation. It is a ghost until the moment it decides to become a god of destruction. But humanity had something the Ethelgard did not account for. Deep beneath the crust of the planet, in a bunker reinforced with layers of neutron-dense alloy and suspended in magnetic fields, sat the Argus array. It was not a radar. It was a gravimetric web, a series of quantum-entangled sensors spread across the entire Sol system. It felt the universe like a spider feels its web, and the web had just twitched. General Marcus Thorne sat in the command chair of the Terran defense grid. He was a man carved from granite and scar tissue, a veteran of the Martian insurrection and the Jovian wars. He was drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid, staring at a screen that showed nothing but green lines. Then the lines turned red, not a blinking red, a solid, screaming crimson. "Report," Thorne barked, his voice cutting through the hum of the command center. "Gravitational anomaly detected," shouted a lieutenant, her fingers flying across her console. "It's massive, sir. Subspatial trajectory. It's not a ship. It's too small. It's a payload." Thorne stood up. "Time to impact." The lieutenant's face went pale. "0, it's already here." The null-point detonator emerged from slipspace 3,000 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean. It appeared with a thunderclap that was felt rather than heard. A sudden displacement of atmosphere that shattered windows in Tokyo and Los Angeles simultaneously. The obsidian cylinder hung there for a microsecond. a dark scar against the blue sky. Then it activated. The physics of the weapon were sound. It began to generate a localized event horizon. It pulled at the fabric of space-time, seeking to collapse the planet into a singularity. The ocean beneath it began to rise, not in waves, but in a solid column of water drawn upward by the impossible gravity. The air screamed as it was sucked into the void. On the Ethelgard dreadnought, Xyler watched the telemetry. Impact confirmed, he said, a smug satisfaction radiating from his carapace. The target is undergoing gravitational collapse, but the telemetry was wrong. Or rather, it was incomplete, because on Earth, General Thorn did not panic. He did not order an evacuation. He did not pray. He pressed a button on his desk, a button labeled simply, Reversal. Humanity had found the ruins of the ancients on Mars. They had found the archives on Venus. They knew about the null-point detonators. They knew the Council had them. And humanity, in its paranoia, in its desperate, clawing need to survive, had built a catcher's mitt. Around the Earth, 6 massive orbital stations, disguised as debris collectors, shed their camouflage. They were not collectors. They were emitters. Giant, tuning fork structures that hummed with energy. As the alien weapon tried to collapse space, the 6 stations fired. They didn't fire lasers. They fired a counter-frequency. A resonance wave designed to stabilize the Higgs field. It was the equivalent of pouring concrete into a whirlpool. The obsidian cylinder screamed. It was a mechanical, psychic scream that echoed on every radio frequency on the planet. The event horizon stalled. The column of water collapsed back into the ocean with a tsunami-generating crash. The black hole that was forming stopped. It didn't disappear. It was frozen, suspended in a stasis field of unimaginable power. The weapon hung in the sky, a dark, vibrating sphere of potential energy caught in a net of human engineering. In the Terran command center, the silence was heavy. "Did we catch it?" Thorn asked. The lieutenant checked her readings. "We caught it, sir. The containment field is holding at 98%. The weapon is dormant." Thorn smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just caught the hunter's spear in its teeth. "Good. Now let's see who threw it." Xyler stared at the screen. The telemetry was garbled. The planet was supposed to be gone. It was supposed to be a swirling debris field. Instead, Earth remained, and there was a new energy signature reading emanating from orbit. A signature that matched the output of the weapon itself, but controlled. "Impossible," Vrelt stammered. They stopped it. That is not possible. The entropy required to halt a null-point reaction is infinite. Unless they didn't halt it, Xyler realized with a sinking dread. Unless they suspended it. Open a channel. "I want to speak to the leader of these savages." The holographic projector flickered to life. Instead of a groveling politician or a weeping civilian, Xyler saw the scarred, stone face of General Thorn. Thorn was still drinking his coffee. "This is High Exarch Xyler of the Galactic Concordat," the alien announced, trying to regain his composure. "You are in violation of galactic law. You are a threat to the stability of the sector. Surrender your vessel and your world, and we will make your end painless." Thorn took a slow sip. He looked at the camera, his eyes cold and hard. "You threw a rock at my house, Xyler." Xyler bristled. "It was an execution. You are a disease. And we are the cure." Thorn set the mug down. "You missed. And now you have a problem. You see that bomb of yours? It's very impressive. Lots of energy. A lifetime of energy for a civilization like ours. We were wondering how we were going to power the new fleet. Thanks for the donation." Xyler laughed. A chattering, nervous sound. "You cannot harness a null-point detonation. It will consume you." "Watch us," Thorn said, and then he cut the feed. The human response was not immediate. They waited. They let the Ethelgard fleet move closer, let them enter the gravity well of the system, confident that the humans were bluffing. The alien ships, thousands of them, surrounded Earth like a swarm of locusts. They charged their plasma batteries, preparing to glass the surface the old-fashioned way. If the superweapon failed, brute force would succeed. But as the fleet prepared to fire, the obsidian cylinder in the atmosphere began to glow. Not the purple of Ethelgard entropy, but a blinding, angry electric blue. The humans were pumping energy into it. They were feeding the bomb. But they weren't detonating it. They were using it as a lens. General Thorn watched the tactical map. The alien fleet was in position. Their shields were up, but their shields were designed to stop lasers and plasma. They were not designed to stop a weaponized gravitational shear. Target the flagship, Thorn ordered, and release the lock. The 6 orbital stations shifted their frequency. The stasis field didn't drop, it inverted. It took the contained energy of the null-point detonator, the energy of a collapsing star, and funneled it through a focal point. A beam of pure, distorted spacetime erupted from the atmosphere of Earth. It didn't travel like light. It traveled instantly, connecting point A to point B by folding the space between them. The beam struck the Ethelgard dreadnought. Xyler didn't even have time to scream. The shields of the dreadnought didn't fail. They simply ceased to be relevant. The beam hit the prow of the massive ship and exited the stern. But it didn't punch a hole, it twisted the ship. The front of the vessel was suddenly occupying the same space as the back. The entire structure was wrung out like a wet towel by the hands of a giant. Metal shrieked, hull plates buckled, and the reactor core was crushed into a diamond the size of a fist. The dreadnought imploded, then exploded, a flower of fire against the dark. The rest of the fleet paused. This was impossible. The primitives had just one-shotted a Leviathan-class warship. Firing solution, Thorn said calmly, scatter shot. The beam from Earth split. It refracted through the atmosphere, splitting into hundreds of smaller tendrils of gravitational distortion. It was a massacre. The alien ships, sleek and advanced, crumpled like tin cans. Engines were torn from chassis. Crews were flattened against bulkheads by sudden G-force spikes of 1,000 Gs. It was not a battle. It was a swatting. In 10 minutes, the Ethelgard fleet was reduced to drifting scrap. The pride of the Galactic Council, the hammer of the Concordat, was gone. Thorn looked at the screen. The energy readings on the captured weapon were still at 90%. It seems we have plenty of ammo left, he muttered. Send a broadcast. Wide band, all frequencies. To whom, sir? The lieutenant asked, her voice trembling with adrenaline. To everyone, Thorn said. Tell them Earth is closed. And tell them if they want their bomb back, they can come and get it. The message went out. It rippled through the subspace relays, reaching the gilded halls of the Council, the trade hubs of the Syndicate, and the warrior creches of the Krill. It was a simple message, accompanied by the video of the dreadnought being twisted into oblivion. The galaxy paused. For thousands of years, the hierarchy had been clear. The old races ruled and the new races obeyed, but something had changed. A new variable had entered the equation. A species that didn't just survive an apocalypse but caught it, domesticated it, and turned it into a gun. The war that followed was not the one the Council expected. They expected a siege. They expected humanity to hide behind their shield and wait to be starved out. But humanity had never been good at sitting still. With the null-point energy source, the humans didn't just defend. They advanced. They reverse-engineered the drive cores from the wreckage of the alien fleet. They combined it with their own rugged, redundancy-heavy technology. The result was a fleet of ships that were ugly, blocky, and utterly unstoppable. They didn't have the elegance of the Ethelgard solar sails. They had engines that burned dirty and shields that sparked. But they had the void cannon. That was what they called the weaponized singularity. The main gun of the Terran flagship, the UNSC Indomitable, was a smaller version of the device that had almost destroyed Earth. It fired bolts of gravity that ignored armor. The first time the Indomitable jumped into a Council system, the defenders laughed. The ship looked like a flying brick. Then the brick fired and the defensive station folded in on itself like an origami crane. The campaign was brutal. Humanity did not fight for territory. They fought for a message. They burned the shipyards of the Ethelgard. They cracked the orbital fortresses of the Krill. They didn't occupy worlds, they disarmed them. They tore down the military infrastructure of the galaxy and left the civilian populations untouched, watching in horror and awe as the terrors of the void were swept aside by the hairless apes from the Dirtball star. But the true turning point came at the siege of Centauri. The Council had rallied the entirety of their remaining forces. 4 grand armadas, thousands of ships. They were waiting for the human fleet. They knew the humans were coming. It was a trap, a kill box designed to overwhelm the Terran shields with sheer volume of fire. Admiral Thorn stood on the bridge of the Indomitable. He was older now. The war had dragged on for 5 years. His hair was gray and the scars on his face were deeper. But his eyes were the same, Cold, calculating, unbroken. Admiral, sensors show the entire Council fleet, his tactician reported. They are hailing us, on screen. The image of a new High Exarch appeared. This one was even more ornate than Xyler, draped in robes of woven light. Human, the alien said, you have fought well, but this ends today. You are outnumbered 50 to 1. Surrender and we will allow your species to exist as a client state. Refuse, and we will not make the mistake of using a single bomb again. We will burn your atmosphere until nothing remains but ash. Thorn looked at the alien. He looked at the fleet arrayed against him. 50 to 1. Bad odds for them. He leaned forward. You still don't get it, do you? You think this is about numbers. You think this is about technology. You think because you have more ships you have already won. The alien sneered. Logic dictates the outcome. Thorn laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Logic, that's your problem. You're so bound by logic you forgot about will. You forgot about spite. You forgot that when you back a human into a corner, he doesn't surrender. He grabs a rock. And if he doesn't have a rock, he tears a hole in the universe and throws that at you instead. Thorn turned to his crew. Initiate the overdrive protocol. The crew froze, sir. The helmsman asked that. That will burn out the core. It'll leave us dead in the water. I know, Thorn said. Do it. The Indomitable shuddered. The containment field around the null point core in the ship's belly was lowered. Not to zero, but dangerously close. The singularity began to spin up. The ship didn't fire a beam. It became the beam. The Indomitable accelerated. Not through subspace, but through real space. It moved at a percentage of light speed that physics said was impossible for a solid object. The mass of the ship, amplified by the singularity, created a bow wave of gravitational distortion so intense it was visible to the naked eye as a warping of the starfield. The alien fleet fired. Lasers, plasma missiles, it all hit the bow wave and curved away. The Indomitable was a bullet made of neutron star density. It rammed the center of the Council formation. It didn't stop. It plowed through the flagship, then the carrier behind it, then the dreadnought behind that. It was a kinetic strike of biblical proportions. The shockwave of the passage shattered the hulls of the ships too close to the vector. The Indomitable punched a hole through the heart of the enemy armada, emerging on the other side, its hull glowing white-hot, its engines slagged, its weapons offline. But the damage was done. The Council fleet was in disarray. Their formation was broken, their flagship was dust, and the rest of the human fleet, which had been hiding in the sensor shadow of the Indomitable, dropped their cloaks. They were already inside the enemy's guard. It was a slaughter. The Council forces broke. They rooted. For the first time in 10,000 years, the great fleets turned their tails and ran. Thorn sat in his chair on the cooling bridge of the Indomitable. The air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. We're drifting, Admiral, the helmsman said. Main power is gone. Life support is on backups. Thorn watched the retreating streaks of light that were the enemy ships. Signal the rest of the fleet. Tell them to pursue, don't let them regroup. And us, sir? Thorn closed his eyes for a moment. We'll wait for a tow. We've earned a break. The war ended 3 months later. The Treaty of Saul was signed on the deck of the repaired Indomitable. The terms were simple. The Galactic Council was dissolved. A new federation was established. One where every species had a vote, not just the old ones, and the guardians of this new peace, the humans. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. You can have the biggest ships. You can have the oldest empire. You can have technology that looks like magic. But you do not pick a fight with the species that looks at a black hole and sees a battery. You do not challenge the indomitable will of a people who consider the impossible to be merely a suggestion. The galaxy had tried to erase humanity. Instead, they had forged them into steel. And as the delegates left the ship, looking nervously at the glowing blue core that powered the massive vessel, they all thought the same thing. They had woken the giant, and they would spend the rest of eternity making sure it never had a reason to be angry again. The universe is a cold, dark place. But around the yellow star of Saul, it burns a little brighter, fueled by the fire of a species that refused to go quietly into the night.